message directly to President Donald Trump, warning him that if he were to engage in U.S. military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, that Iran has a number of sleeper cells here in the United States, and they could unleash some sort of a terror attack here domestically.
Okay, sometime before Donald Trump launched the strikes in Iran, Iran sent a back channel message saying, amongst other retributions, that Iran has many sleeper cells in the United States that would be activated to take revenge, terrorist. Now, I want to take you back to some things that have been happening in the lead up to Trump's presidency and right after he became president, already involving Iran, and even back to his first time in office, because Trump and Iran specifically have a certain antagonistic relationship. So picture this: Iranian intelligence agents slash heroin kingpins recruiting Canada's Hells Angels members to carry out assassinations on U.S. soil. Sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, but it's not even fiction. It's the reality of how Iran is transformed by outsourcing homicide to criminals here. So whether their sleeper cells are Iranian, some of them could be, or they are Iranian operators that have Canadian, perhaps Mexican, U.S. criminals from the various criminal underworlds ready to go. Now, you remember when Trump was almost snizite? Now, the story for that guy is something else, but the day before that happened, a Pakistani man was arrested for attempting to mastermind several hit squads targeting high-level political figures in the U.S. And that's just the tip of an iceberg of a story that involves a guy named Zendashti, who's sort of like a Kaiser Soze, an international.
Yeah, listen.
One of the biggest
Listen
in the
what my
world,
boy's saying.
In Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan actually form in Iraq the largest, like those countries have the highest percentage of their population using opiates, even more than the U.S. And in fact, crystal meth is a problem in the city of Basra in Iraq. They send out 12 raid crews just to hit meth houses every night. So I bet you didn't know that was going on in these religious countries.
Y'all
but it's
listen to him.
Separate story. So
This dude know what he's talking about.
let's start off with let's start off with this Hells Angels connection to the Iranian government. There's a guy named Damian Patrick John Ryan, a Canadian Hells Angel member who became an international assassin for hire in 2021. An Iranian criminal mastermind named Naji Sharif Zendashti, the guy I mentioned, that was like Kaiser Soze, recruited Ryan to hit Iranian dissidents and fled to the U.S.
Hey,
What's
what's
a
up?
dissident? It could be a journalist who's
Better take heed, listen to what he's saying. For real. Listen to this dude. He's for real.
Could be a woman that doesn't
No bullshit, you guys.
various laws.
Some serious shit going on.
Women. It could be a politician that's going against the grain. It could be a military general that's on the outs. It's a dissident. If you ever hear that word, it means someone has to leave their own country. They're in danger because basically their political beliefs. So Zendashti had this Hells Angel on deck to take care of people who had left Iran, or journalists over here that were talking, not necessarily bad about Iran, but weren't saying what the current Iranian religious government wants. Now, this Hells Angel Ryan's criminal history ranged from firearms trafficking to international dope dealing. There's a lot of serious criminals out of Canada because they have no RICO law. And he had ties to criminal elements across Canada, the U.S., and Greece. And working through encrypted messaging services, Zendashti sent Ryan photos of locations of targets, coordinating payment details like he was ordering Grubhub. here's the spot, and I want you to bring yourself and a gun there and put one in. The conversations are pretty chilling if you read them. And Ryan recruited another Hell's Angel affiliate, Adam Richard Pearson, to help carry out some homicides. Pearson casually discussed logistics. Shooting is probably easiest for them, he said, and he promised to tell the hit team to shoot the victim in the head a lot to make an example and to, quote, erase his head from his torso. So they wanted to, well, it's terror. You want to terrorize the population. So not only do you want to take someone out, you want to do it in such a brutal way that it frightens others. Between December of 2020 and March of 2021. So this is Biden is president at this point. This is after Trump's first term. The network planned to murder 2 residents of Maryland, Iranian defectors who had fled to America for safety. Zendasti and the Hell's Angel Ryan agreed on $350,000 plus $20,000 for expenses. So Zendasti has unlimited, unlimited, but Zendasti's paying a lot more than normal for hits. $350,000 is a lot of money. Again, he's a massive H trafficker. He's a person involved in bringing raw opium over from Afghanistan, processing it in league with Turkish dealers who are heavy in the business. So they actually turn it into the finished product. Some is sold there in Iran, Pakistan, Iraq, and then, obviously lots of it is sent to places like Canada, Australia, Western Europe. So he's a true international kingpin. And he supplies the Iranian elites. So some of these military people, the rich families, some of the religious leaders, smoking opium especially, but also hitting the needle is, believe it or not, you don't think of these countries as that going on, but it goes on at a higher rate there than even in our own country. And so he had $350,000 for these hits on these 2 dissidents, and he told Zendasti they had a 4-man team ready. Now, U.S. law enforcement actually intercepted these communications. They disrupted the plot, but of course, this case revealed something terrifying. Iran wasn't just using, volunteer spies. They were hiring the most violent criminal organizations in the world, people that have experience in pulling off hits. The Canadian biker world, especially from about 85 to 95 in Montreal, probably there were worse things in Mexico, but a worse in terms of people killed on each side, a worse war went on between the Montreal Hell's Angels and another group called the Rock Machine than any criminal war, any mob thing, any war between any 2 particular gangs in the U.S. There was like 150 murders. They were blowing each other up. So these guys have experience in killing people in public. Now let's talk about the main event, the plot from Iran to bump off Donald Trump. Now the story begins with the death of Qasem Soleimani, Iran's top general who was killed in a U.S. airstrike ordered by Trump. They hit him at the Baghdad International Airport in January 2020. So right when Trump was about to leave office, right when the people were storming the Capitol building, that was one of Trump's last acts. He had a targeted strike to hit this general. Soleimani headed Iran's Revolutionary Guard. So these are the branch of the military that's tied in with the religious leaders. They're the ones tasked with overseeing terrorist groups. So like Hezbollah and Hamas, their connection through Iran, well, their contact people is the Revolutionary Guard. Soleimani was the head of that Trump took him out with a targeted strike in January of 2020, and Iran's supreme leader declared him a martyr of the revolution, and Iran wanted revenge starting at that time. So a kind of a blood feud forms between Trump and the Iranian religious leadership at this time. So now we have a guy named Farhad Shakiri, a 51-year-old Afghani man with a fascinating backstory. Again, if you're not used to thinking about people from these countries as being criminals, a lot of these terrorists come out of prisons and jails and criminal life. There's jails, there's drugs and pimps and stealing and gangs in all these countries, in Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Iran and Pakistan. It's just like anywhere else.
Glad to know you guys.
Zakari, who at one point was the number 2 man in Al-Qaeda, who was the one that was brutally just taking tens of thousands of lives in Iraq. He was a guy that was a petty criminal, had tattoos, probably was a pimp, a drug user. He went into jail in Lebanon and got turned onto Islam, and then he turned.
So you guys, this is some real shit that's really popping off. And for those who coming in, welcome to AJ's room / AJ's YouTube page. You know, we're in some serious times right now, you guys, where, you know, I'm not going to be scared to go out. My family is not going to be scared to go out. But in the same prospect, we got to watch out for what motherfuckers out here and putting our life in danger of doing to us and all this kind of shit. And this guy right here that I'm sharing, he knows his shit and he knows who he knows what the fuck he's talking about. And I'm not gonna say too much on it, but I know peeps. That's all I'm saying. And this man right here, he knows what the fuck he talking about, and it do makes a lot of motherfucking sense. So it's like, why the fuck did we go and get involved in some shit that didn't really have shit to fucking do with us? You know, I'm just gonna let my boy play it out. But y'all see what I wrote in the, you know, what this video was about. And I like y'all feedback on it, because it gets crazy. You know, as my pastor said, you know, the black horse is riding. You know, you don't go to heaven till you leave this hellhole. And, you know, we're living in hell. You know, we're living in hell. So we just gonna take it as it come, and we're gonna do what we got to do and keep it pushing. But let's get back to my boy, who's making a lot of motherfucking sense. If y'all don't believe me, y'all go follow my boy. Go check him out. He know his shit, and he up on some real shit about the gang members and all this kind of crazy shit. He's pretty smooth with his shit. Now he's talking about the president ass. Here we go.
And what he was. So a lot of this, there's a lot of overlap between the criminal, petty criminal or serious criminal underworld there in the Middle East and these terrorists. A lot of these people are not necessarily just motivated by religion. A lot of them are being paid. So Farhad Shakiri, so the Afghan guy. So he came to the U.S. as a teenager, probably because if you were Afghan in the 80s when the Soviets were fighting in Afghanistan, it was probably relatively easy to migrate to the U.S. as a political, you know, you were fleeing a country under attack by our enemy, the Soviet Union. So he comes to the U.S. under political asylum, but instead of the American dream, he chose crime. He ends up spending 14 years in the New York State pen for sticking people up. He becomes a stick-up kid. And here's where it gets even more interesting. So he was in Woodbourne Correctional Facility from 94 to 08. So I guess he did all of his time there. If you're from New York, is Woodbourne is that a hardcore place? Shakiri met other inmates involved in similar activities. So there was a lot of lot of Muslim, a lot of people turn Muslim, a lot of Islam in prison, and very little of it is people who want to be terrorists. But of course, probably there is a little bit of that. And when you're in a place where people's freedom has been taken, they're incarcerated, probably not that hard to get people to turn against the U.S. government and at least talk about doing TERROS type activities. So he gets probably radicalized in there. He gets out and he moves to Iran of all places, and he joins the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So this part of the Iranian military tasked with dealing with Hezbollah, Hamas, and overseeing terrorist activities around the world. Whose leader Soleimani was killed by Trump on his, might have been his last day in office in January of 2020. This Afghani guy who grew up in the U.S. became a stick-up man. When he gets out from doing his time, he goes to Iran and joins this group.
I see dead people.
Sorry, just checking.
Hey, Monster Hunter beat, ho, deep, bow, beat, rap, nigga, ear, free throw, man down.
So, some documents the U.S. government has gotten a hold of some documents, and according to them, Iranian officials, once this guy Shakiri gets there, asked him to focus on surveilling and assassinating Trump. So he wasn't going to stay in Iran. He goes there to kind of get an assignment, and they send him back to the U.S. And on recorded wiretap calls, Shakiri told them that on October 7th of 2024 that he had 7 days to formulate an assassination plan. The timeline was crucial. If Shakiri couldn't develop a plan within 7 days, the Islamic Revolutionary Republican Guard would have to wait until after the presidential election, and they didn't think Trump was going to win. So they wanted to specifically bump off Trump as revenge for Soleimani, whether Trump was the president or not. So they wanted to get him while he was still on the campaign trail. They didn't have to wait till after the election, even though it would have been easier.
It's fucked up. It's deep, you guys. This shit deep. This shit run deep.
So, of course, Shakiri wasn't working alone. He had met a bunch of criminals while he was in prison. And a lot of them were willing to supply Iranian officials with work. So they had more operatives, and these are people coming out of prison. This is something that, if you read, U.S. law enforcement stuff, they're very worried about a radicalization on a large scale of U.S. prison inmates, and they probably should be. People spend their whole life in jail. What allegiance might you have to quote-unquote America? Maybe not much. So Shakiri starts paying these guys he met in prison to follow these targets that the Iranian officials wanted to assassinate, and they were, Shakiri, after setting things back up in the U.S., he went back to Iran, and he was running the operation via WhatsApp and stuff from Tehran. Once he came to the U.S. and set up all his contacts, he was running it from Tehran. So 2 Americans get arrested as co-conspirators, Carlisle Rivera and Jonathan Lodehold. So these are not Middle Eastern people. They're accused of helping the Iranian government of surveil a woman named Alinejad, who was a female journalist from Iran. She had fled to the U.S. She criticizes the Iranian government for a variety of ways. The journalists, just like under Putin, journalists are not safe in Iran. But Shakiri's criminal resume goes beyond assassination plots. Of course, we know that Okay, so just like we know about the story of, well, you saw a kind of a fictionalized version of it on Snowfall, but of the U.S. intelligence allying itself in some way with drug dealers, so it can have large sums of money, because the U.S. president cannot give people money; only Congress can. But if the U.S. president wants the CIA to do stuff, it requires money. Where's the money going to come from? Well, working with drug dealers is a great way to run up, 10 million here, 30 million there. So this Shakiri guy, in addition to running these operations where he has old prison buddies following Iranian journalists, just before the pandemic, he got arrested in Sri Lanka with 92 bricks of untouched H, which is worth 15 million wholesale in Australia, but heroin breaks down. By the time that hit the street, you're probably looking at $250 million in sales. So, and those things don't cost nothing. They probably cost 5,000 in India. So it's 100. So $500,000 gets you 15 million wholesale, right? You're making 30 times your money, and then whoever breaks it down is making another 20 times your money. That's why H is so. People like being involved with H. So this 15 million was going to be used in these terrorist operations. It was going to be used to pay people like Shakiri's old prison buddies. Iranians also asked Shakiri to plan a mass shooting target of Israeli tourists while he was in Sri Lanka doing his 92 brick deal, which got broken up. Fortunately, that never happened, right? So, hey, you're in Sri Lanka picking up the dope, might as well machine gun some Israelis too. Now let's get into the Pakistani connection. There's a guy named Asif Raza Merchant. He was 46-year-old Pakistani man. He got arrested in New York on July 12th of 2024, just one day before the white guy tried to snazzy prison. After spending 2 weeks in Iran, Merchant came to the U.S. in April with plans to assassinate political figures. He contacted someone he thought he could help carry out his plans, but that guy got spooked and immediately called the feds, became an informant. So the feds were tracking this Merchant guy all along. In early June, he went from Texas to New York, and he had some contacts up there, and he told them he wanted to target people that were hurting Pakistan and the Muslim world. He offered somebody $5,000 down on a $100,000 fee. He told people he represented conspirators outside the U.S. and he had wives in Pakistan and Iran. And the targets weren't normal people. They were prominent political figures with security details. He didn't say who that was. Could have that been Trump? Merchant encouraged his informant to travel to Iran personally. So remember, this guy he's telling all this to has already he probably got spooked when a Merchant even tried to bring him in on him. So he told the feds, and he wanted this guy to go to Iran personally and to meet with the higher-ups to finalize all the plans, but the guy didn't want to do it, and it got broken up by the feds. So, the bigger picture. There's 88 plots and counting. So this is a little bit old even. At the time I wrote this, there'd been 88 assassination, abduction, and other violent plots linked to Iran here in America over just the last 5 years. At least 14 of those involved criminal groups rather than traditional intelligence operatives. Iran's target list reads like a who's who of regime critics. A former Iranian military officer living in Maryland under a fake name. That's where the Hells Angels were going to get. An Iranian journalist in Brooklyn
a women's rights activist in Switzerland, LGBTQ plus activists in Germany. So they want to go after, not only do they want to chase the LGBT out of the country, some that they had chased out of the country that were in Germany, they were simply writing about LGBT rights in Iran. They wanted them hit. And there was more than a dozen different activists across 5-6 countries that they wanted things done to. And what about Iran's connection with all these criminal groups? Well, not only do they have their own homegrown Zendasti, they work with the Russian thieves in the law. You may have heard of them. Russian organized crime is known as thieves in the law. Super duper interesting if you don't know about that. Lots of documentary, Russian thieves in the law. They've worked with Swedish gangsters and even South American criminal groups. Again, South American yayo people, there's a lot of political intrigue going on down there. If you're associated with the government and you can help move large loads of stuff from South America to other places, once again, a great way to make a lot of money. One thing that's changed in the yayo market nowadays from back, say, in the 80s, the U.S. is not just the only market, it's not the main market. Western Europe, Middle East, West Africa, China, India, the whole world is a market. Australia, and sending, 500 bricks to be sold in Qatar and Dubai or something where you're getting a couple 100,000 for each one is make a lot of money real fast. And they've also worked with the Hells Angels and other Eastern European criminals. And speaking of these Eastern European criminals, they hit a guy named Zarati, an exiled Iranian journalist working for Iran International and London-based news channels. British authorities have been putting them in and out of safe houses. None of it mattered. March 29th of 2024, they stabbed him outside his home right near Wimbledon. And the people that did it weren't Iranian, they were Eastern European criminals, and investigators believe he might have been allowed to survive intentionally as a warning, rather than they didn't want the British government coming down on them for actually MURDERing someone on their soil. They stabbed him up good though. They wanted to send a message, and they used so whatever part of the world is convenient. There's a lot of Eastern European gangsters in England, so they use them there. In the U.S., they're using Hells Angels and Hispanic guys that people met in prison. So it just depends on what part of the world that you're in. And Iran is funding a lot of us, like I said, with a empire of dope. And as I mentioned earlier, it's shocking. You probably think of Iran as a very religious country. It's actually the world's #1 consumer of opiates. 42% of the world's opium, which is a form, it goes from the raw poppies to opium. You let the sap dry, it turns into opium balls. People still smoke that. 42% of the smoked opium is in Iran, goes on in Iran, but 5% of actual finished H is used in Iran. I think you can get like almost pure grams of H in Iran for like $5 or something, or $3. So people have horrific habits over there. The Taliban in Afghanistan runs huge drug cleanup centers. They send their Taliban guys out with AK-47s and round up all kind of people in the street and just take them for treatment, and it's basically cold turkey. Now, Iran, they have their chosen dealers, and Dasti, they also do fight. They don't just let everybody move stuff in there. It's probably because the government wants to control it. There's been literally thousands, you don't hear about this, there's been thousands of Iranian police and military who've died in clashes with traffickers. So when next time you go into 7-Eleven and you think them Indians or whoever or Habibi at the corner store like they soft or something, they're from a very lot of violence in their part of the world, a lot of dissolve going on, and you need to be talking to Habibi about getting you that plug. No, I'm just kidding. So, so the situation just like kind of like in Mexico with the government and dealers going at each other, and the government have certain chosen protected dealers. Well, in the case in Iran, while there's thousands of their soldiers dying in gun battles with the people bringing stuff over the Afghan border, someone like Zindashti is allowed to operate, and he works closely with the Republican guards whose head Soleimani was taken out by Bush. So Zindashti is probably one of the people personally tasked with going after not Bush, Trump. Now let's talk about Mujahideen Kelk. So there's a exiled Iranian political group called the Mujahideen Kelk. They're in Albania right now. They're waiting for Iran's current religious government to fall so they can establish a democratic, non-religious government. This would completely change the Middle East political order. So this would be one of the groups if Iran's mullah Ayatollah system went away. I mean, these are religious people, but they want to have a democratic secular government. The U.S. is backing them. Who's received big money to speak at their events and lobbied on their behalf? Trump's former personal lawyer and the man who broke the mob, Rudy Giuliani, amongst others. And they may be the ones, so just like Bibi Netanyahu may have contributed to guiding Trump's thoughts into attacking Iran. Now, this Kelk group, through Giuliani, may have influenced Trump back in 2020. Hey, you need to hit this Soleimani guy. So Israel and other rival groups to the Iranian religious leaders influencing Trump to attack Iran. Well, it may be all of us as U.S. citizens that suffer the revenge if there's these sleeper cells.
What the fuck is a sleeper cell, you guys? What the fuck?
So what makes this so
lot.
scary, obviously, is the evolution in tactics. Iran has moved from traditional espionage to what experts call transnational repression, using violence and intimidation in foreign countries. Iran is, if you don't know, Iran is quite a large country, a lot bigger than Iraq. It has oil. It was pretty westernized and quite well off before the 1979 revolution. And the story, to me, something that's interesting also, I keep mentioning so many of the people involved in this are just former criminals, and a lot of the people who get involved in terrorism in the Middle East are social outcasts, drug addicts, street criminals from Middle Eastern urban areas with high unemployment. Well, does that sound familiar? The United States has spent the last 40 plus years creating these reservation-like neighborhoods in the cities, often predominantly black communities, where a high percentage of the people go to prison. They're disconnected from the mainstream society and economy. And if they get so, feel like they're so disconnected from the mainstream that they start being recruited to help countries like Iran, and who knows? That could be some of the sleeper cells. I mean, if you grew up in some awful ghetto where the school, listen, when I went to school in Detroit, we didn't even get school books in a lot of classes. We had no textbook. So you grow up like that where you're really not even given an educational opportunity. You might start going to jail at a young age, family members murdered. What do you care about America? I could see that in our future of there being a lot of militantized former U.S. prison inmates, because that's where they're coming from in the Middle East. So, what does it all mean? Formal statement from the U.S. says there's few actors in the world that pose as grave a threat to the national security as the U.S. does Iran, and we just attacked them. Justice Department has charged assets of the Iranian regime tasked with directing networks of criminal associates to further Iran's assassination plots, including against Donald Trump. And this isn't just about revenge for Soleimani's death. This represents a fundamental shift in how international conflict is conducted through criminal proxies who can strike anywhere, anytime. So these criminal groups are already set up to operate in multiple countries to be secretive. They have the ability to take people out.
So you guys be aware.
And then the government can partner with them and provide. I mean, if you're a drug dealer, you sure would love to have a partnership with the government who says, oh, well, you can move your stuff on our naval vessels. Oh, you want to move some H from Turkey to Dubai? Put it on an Iranian military ship. So now you help these criminals make a lot more money, and they'll do favors for you. This is the story of the CIA, starting from its creation at the end of World War II, all the way up until now, of working with drug dealers, because they already have the international cross-border organization set up. You can help them make money by using your government umbrella to protect them. This went on from the AIDS business at the end of World War II all the way up through, well, we know all the different stuff that went on. So Iran and the Hells Angels allied, Iran and Eastern European gangsters, Iran and all types of criminals. Zendasti's one of the main people, and a lot of it goes back to this attack on Soleimani when Trump was going out in 2020, and now Trump has hit them again, seemingly. I wouldn't be surprised if Benjamin Netanyahu worked him into it. We certainly seem to conduct an awful lot of our foreign policy to benefit Israel. And I'm not anti-Israel, but shouldn't the U.S. foreign policy be about benefiting us?
Yeah.
So yeah, this milieu of criminals and terrorists, you might have not known it existed, but it does.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in effect. And with this threat from Iran about operating sleeper cells, you got to ask yourself, there's a lot of disaffected people that have been to prison here in the U.S. Might some of them be U.S. citizens that were radicalized through incarceration? As we know, that did happen with people going over to fight for the ISIS caliphate and things like that. So, what does the future hold? I don't know. Keep your eyes open. Be careful, because these sleeper cells may have something planned for a town or a place that you're in. Now, profit American dope.